King James Bible University presents The Lost Sheep of Israel with Bible teacher Elder Michael Johnson. Teaching the world the true meaning of Isaiah 28:9 and 10. So, have your Bible, notepad, and pencil ready as he goes through today's study.
Shalom, everyone. Shalom. I want to welcome everyone to King James Bible University. I'm Elder Michael Johnson from the Lost Sheep of Israel. So today we have an interesting teaching today that we're going to be going through. And it's Paul, a teacher against the law, with the question mark. The main reason for this teaching because many people have mixed understandings based on Paul's teachings. So many people believe that they are to keep the laws of the Most High, but by way of the teachings of Paul, sometimes they are confused. And some of the teachings contained in the teachings of Paul writings, in Paul writings, as also was stated by Peter. He said some of Paul writings, some things were hard to be understood. So we're going to go through some of Paul's writings, and we're going to see if Paul taught against the laws of the Most High, or did Paul teach to help you understand the laws of the Most High in a better way to where it can make it more clear. Now, Peter says this about Paul, but even before we start to deconstruct any of Paul's letters, first we're going to get some application. We're going to get a little bit of history on Paul, and we're going to find out what Paul is about before we even go into one of Paul's main writings. So the first place we're going to look at 2 Peter. We're going to look at 2 Peter 3 and 15. And it says, in the account that the long suffering of our Lord is salvation, even as our beloved brother Paul, according to the wisdom given unto him, have written to you. Now, we need to explain this, because this verse is not talking about wisdom from man. See, because right here where it says wisdom given unto him, it's not talking about wisdom of man. This is wisdom of the Most High. Human wisdom involves knowledge and ability to direct the mind towards a full understanding of human life and towards its mortal fulfillment, which is most times is lust, deceit, and everything else. But the necessarily full living that they talking about on man is manly wisdom. But when you're looking at most times when most people see that this manly wisdom, which is acquired through education and the application of the mind. Now, when you're dealing with godly wisdom, what this is talking about, godly wisdom is a special capacity necessarily for the full human life, which can be acquired through education of the Most High. Also by the teachers and preachers he has given unto you. These are not the preachers and teachers for money or for wine, but to teach the application of the Most High in the mind that you should be following. And it's comprised of principally, and this is the important part, it's comprised of principally the books of Job, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiasticus, and the Wisdom of Solomon. These are your Proverbs books. These are the books that you can also get godly wisdom, because these contain some of his wisdom speakings. Now, it's also found in portions of Psalms and other prophets. But wisdom literature contained in the mortal substance to the true wisdom in Proverbs and the intellectual explanations of wise men seeking to understand the fundamental problems of human existence, which you can also find in Job and Ecclesiastes. Now, the wisdom of God, although the term wisdom here is primarily in the Old Testament with reference to human beings, all wisdom ultimately is rooted and grounded in God. Wisdom forms a central part of the natural parts of God. Wisdom, God created the universe. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding have he established the heavens. Psalms 3:19. O Lord, how manifold are thy works. In wisdom hast thou made them all. The earth is full of thy riches. Psalms 104:24. So we see here, even based on these two scriptures, we see this is godly wisdom. So these matters that are not to be understood by human beings or any other living creature can fully comprehend within the wisdom of God. If you want to get a real clear understanding on what he's saying, please read Job 28:12-23. Job 28:12-23. But wisdom is a poverty, condemnation is something to be inherited from God, reflecting in creation as a part of the reason for human existence. Nobody wants to be destroyed. This is the main thing that we have to understand. This is why Paul is making this statement, because nobody wants to be destroyed. But if we follow the lying preachers in the way they like to twist the scriptures, then we also will experience the same destruction that the Most High has planned for all the scripture twisters and liars with man wisdom. This is why Paul wrote this. Human wisdom of scripture and understanding and believing in the Most High charged here that we must do just that. The Most High gave Paul godly wisdom, which you'll see here, and this is why it says, according to the wisdom given unto him, have written unto you. Now we're going to look at 3:16. It says, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, which are some things hard to be understood. You see that? And why he's saying, which in some things, in all his epistles. That means all Paul's letters include Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon, and we also have Hebrews. This is what Peter is getting ready to explain to us all. In all his epistles, speaking of them, which these things, which some things are hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable wrists, who wrestle with these scriptures as they do other scriptures unto their own destructions. Some of these writings within the letters are hard to be understood, fully to comprehend the understanding of Paul's letters. These are the ones who will continue to teach this false doctrine, thinking they're teaching you a true doctrine, but they're teaching you a false doctrine. And Paul's letters clearly do not understand one book of the law, because what they'll do, they'll go through Paul and teach directly against the law, not fully understanding what Paul was writing. Paul teaches nothing but the law. This mixed teaching that people think that he was teaching against the law, they are teaching unrighteousness, because many are unlearned and wrestle with the scriptures. This is clear today, and this is why you have so many churches today, and everybody using the same book, but they coming out with a different doctrine. Everybody should have the same doctrine, because there's only one doctrine in this book. But they do this to their own destructions and yours for the rewards of unrighteousness. And unrighteousness is clearly sin, which we're going to see. Let's go over to 2 Peter 2:12 to where we can get this foundation. It says, but these is unnatural brute beasts. What is it talking about? This is what the teachers and preachers really are. Brute beasts, not understanding anything of righteousness, or what Peter is speaking of, just personal gain. These will perish to their own corruption and own destruction. Watch this. And it says, speaking evil things that they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption. Now let's go down to verse 13. And shall receive the reward of unrighteousness, as they count it pleasure to riot in the daytime spot, and they are in blemishes, sporting themselves to their own deceiving while they feast with you. And sporting is making fun of. So they making fun within sin how they can teach better doctrine lies than the other one. Then they take the same lies and teach them to you. This is why so many believe Paul did away with the law. And sometimes he didn't. In some things he did not do at all that they say he did. But we're gonna soon find out. But nevertheless, the reward for unrighteousness is no reward from the Most High at all, which we're going to see. This is why I always say in the Bible says reward of unrighteousness, but you're going to see right here where it's even talking about that. Reward of unrighteousness is not righteousness at all. Why? Because unrighteousness is sin. Let's go over to 1 John 5:17. Let's see what it says. All unrighteousness is sin, and there is a sin not unto death. So if you definitely all unrighteous, if the definition of unrighteousness is sin, clearly there's no reward for it. So what the Bible was saying with talking about reward of unrighteousness is nothing. But what is sin? All sin is death. That's the reward that it's actually talking about. We're going to see this part. We're going to go to Proverbs 24, and we're going to see what this is. It says, "For there shall be no reward to the evil man, and the candle of the wicked shall be put out." Talking about be put to death. That's all that's saying. Your light will be completely put out. Believing you can teach and believe, you can go and visit and do all these things, but these false mixed doctrines, this is not nothing but evil. But the unlearned person will teach the law is done away with. We're going to look at Paul's writings to show the clear scriptures on how he continued to point us directly to the First Testament. This is what most people always miss, and most people don't want to tell you. Paul consistently pointed you to the First Testament, which is the Old Testament, but that's what they want to call it, but it's the First Testament. Paul never taught against the law, but the unlearned, Paul teaches against the law. So again, Paul never taught against the law, but to the unlearned, Paul taught against the law of the Most High and teaches us to do likewise. So first we're going to get some background on the history of Paul. So for us to get the history on Paul, before we even go into his letter, let's get some personal history on him, get his character and his makeup, and find out something about Paul. So we're going to let Paul, and Paul going to even speak for himself. Let's go over to the New Testament, and we're going to go over to Acts 21, and we're going to go to 40. Acts 21, and we're going to pick it up at 40. And it says, "And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with his hand to the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue." So now everywhere Paul went, Paul can speak these different languages, but where he was here, he spoke to them in the Hebrew tongue, saying, "Men, brethren, and fathers, hear my defense which I make down unto you." 41, and then it goes down. "And when they heard that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept more silent, and he saith." So now, when the people noticed that Paul spoke the Hebrew tongue, see, now all of a sudden, now they're paying more attention to him. But watch, he goes on further. He said, "I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarshish, in the city of Cilicia, yet brought up in the city at the feet of Gamaliel. Now we're going to find out some stuff on him, but let me finish this out and I'm going to explain something there. And he taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous towards God, as ye are all are this day. Now, Gamaliel, most people need to understand. Paul was a Jew brought up at the feet of Gamaliel. Who is Gamaliel? Gamaliel was a doctor of the law. He knew the law perfectly. Understand what I'm not saying he was doing the law, but he knew it perfectly. And we're going to find this out in 1 second, because we need to get history on Paul to understand what the makeup is of Paul. But Gamaliel, for you to even sit at Gamaliel, we're going to find out some things in a minute, to where for you just to sit there, you had to know the Old Testament perfectly, just to sit at his feet. And Paul was zealous towards the Most High. So that quick caveat on Gamaliel history, let's get some on that, because we're going to see this. We're going to go to Acts 5 and pick it up at 34. It says, then stood there up in the council a Pharisee. So we know clearly Gamaliel was a Pharisee. So he knew the perfect order of the law, but he can inject his own interpretations based on, he will add to the law. This is what he was doing. This is why he was a Pharisee, named Gamaliel, a doctor of the law. He knew the law perfectly. This is what the problem was. But it says, goes on more, had a reputation among all the people, and commanded to put the apostles forth in a little space. So some back history on Gamaliel. Paul sat at the feet at Gamaliel to learn. And you must be able to quote the first 5 books of Moses verbatim to him. This is what Gamaliel, this is what he was about. It should let you know clearly that Paul understood the law. Now, many I've been told on a little caveat, and I'll go right back to it. On caveat, I learned under Dr. Raphael Shaul, who can do the same identical thing what I'm telling you right now. But these are people who know something and they don't bend. Now, Shaul would not bend on anything. He's a pretty tough teacher, but he don't bend on nothing. But now Paul set up under this man, and Paul knew the perfect order. But if you look at the perfect manner on how Paul knew it, Paul knew the laws of the Most High, and what he would be teaching against them, because he didn't. That you think after coming to Christ, Paul never turned back. After Paul himself was a master of knowing the law, he first started out using the law to slaughter the Jews. Why? He was sharper than they were. Way sharper in the law than they were, and he could twist them up a lot easier. But who believed on Jesus Christ, but when he was on his way to Damascus, Jesus called on him to be a teacher. And he called him to be a teacher to who? To the Hellenist Jews. These Jews who was acting and calling themselves Greeks and everything else. This is who he was called to teach. Why? Because he can be more convincing because of what he was doing. They are Gentiles. Most people think they are Gentiles becoming Jews, and that's not, and these are believers in Christ, but that's not what they were doing. These were Jews acting as everything else, acting as Gentiles, and he was bringing them back to the fold. So if Jesus only came to save the house of the lost sheep of Israel, the Hellenist ones who think they're everything else but what they really are, Israelite Jews. This is who Jesus only came to save. That's it. Most people have a problem with that. But we're going to see as we go through here exactly what's going on. Paul was commissioned to go to the very ones that are lost. That's why he commissioned Paul to go to the lost ones. He was the one who was skilled enough to do that. This is why the other disciples wasn't commissioned to do that. But Paul was. Why? Because Paul knew the law perfectly. Paul had the skills and the knowledge of the law for what? For persuasion. Now, to show you even more about what most people think, that they sit under false teachers and preachers so long, this is what they was doing. They sat under them so long, they didn't know more about what truth was, because they sitting there thinking they sitting under a shepherd, and the shepherd don't know nothing, as I showed you earlier. Let's look at Jeremiah 50:6. Jeremiah 50:6. It says, "For my people have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have caused them to go astray. They have turned them away on the mountains. They have gone from the mountain to hill. They have forgotten their resting place." Your resting place is in him. The nation of Israel are the lost sheep scattered throughout the earth. The false teachers and pastors have caused us to worship Allah, Baal, Buddha, Hindu, Wiccan, Buddhism, New Age. We done did everything, and then we also have the other ones who teaching about another Christ. And then they're sitting there talking about how that one gonna save you, and you don't have to do nothing for it. This is why Jesus even tell you he came to seek and to save which is lost. Watch. Let's go to Luke 19:10. Luke 19:10. It says, "For the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost." So Jeremiah just explained his people have been lost sheep. Jesus came to seek and to save them, the Israelite Jews. Because you can even go back in Deuteronomy and look even in verse 28, in chapter 28, and it tell you he was going to disperse you for a certain reason. This is what part of the problem. But now to hone in more on Jesus and why Jesus commissioned Paul, we're going to find out. Let's go to Matthew 15, and we're going to pick it up at verse 22. Now, this is what many people are going to find out that's really crazy. Now, verse 22, it says, "And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the coast and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievous, vexed with a devil." Now, many people teach that this woman from Canaan is a Canaanite. But this is where they're wrong. Jesus came to seek and to save the lost sheep of the house of Israel. We can go back and look at this verse one more time. It says, "And behold, a woman of Canaan." She's just from Canaan. She don't say she's a Canaanite. It says she's from there. You see that? A woman of Canaan. It don't say a Canaanite woman. It says a woman of Canaan, a woman from Canaan, telling you the same identical thing. This is the problem what most people do. She's not a Cushite woman. She lived in Canaan, where many Hellenists lived. She knows who Jesus is, the son of David, and the only way to know is by what? Her searching the scriptures for herself. But it even gets better. Watch. "But he answered her not a word, and his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she crieth after us." This is clearly what she's saying. And his disciples wanted to send her away. But watch what this Hellenist Canaanite woman that's from Canaan, that's an Israelite, watch what's going to happen. 24. It says, "But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel." That's the only people he sent to. He is not sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, period. But something goes on special from here. But watch how clear this gets on what I said for verse 22. This is a woman from Canaan that's an Israelite. Let's go to verse 25. "Then she said, then she and worshipped him. Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Help me, Lord. How does she know, one, how to worship him? If she's Canaanite, that wouldn't make sense. Why? Because he only showed his laws and his statutes and his commandments to Israel. Only them the ones that know this. So how would she know how to worship him? If you go look at Psalms 147, 19 and 20, you'll see. You look at Amos 3, 1 and 2, you'll see perfectly clear he only dealt with Israel. Period. So how would she know this? But he's going to get better. He said, but he answered and said, is it not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs? Now, what is he saying here? We're going to break this completely down in 20 seconds, because it is not lawful to take bread and cast it unto the dogs. For the Hellenist Jews are not keeping the commandments according to God. They're all dogs. How do you know this? We're going to look at, it's not in here, but look at Revelations 22 and 15. And it tells you in verse 14, keeping the commandments, but verse 15 says, for without are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters and whosoever loveth make it a lie. Revelations 22:15 is telling you them who without the commandments of God are dogs. But who is he talking to? He's talking to the Israelite people. These are the ones that are lost. And once he sit there and he delivers the truth to you and you choose not to take them, this is what you are to him. Period. This is what he's saying. So that's why he said, is it not meet to take children's bread and cast it to the dogs? To cast it to people who's not keeping the commandments of God. That's all he's saying. Verse 27. And she said, true Lord, yet the dogs eat the crumbs which falleth from the master's table. What is she saying? She's stating even that she's living in Canaan with these Canaanite dogs. In not living as an Israelite, she still obeyed the smallest of the commandments of the Most High. This is all she's saying. That's why she's saying even the crumbs, the smallest thing, crumbs is the smallest thing you can get a hold to from bread. And she said what? Even eat the crumbs that which fall from the master's table. This is why Jesus later on says, great is thy faith. And he healed her daughter. And when they called on Jesus a liar, that's what you want to call. This is why he called Paul to commission to deal with them. Why? Because Paul knew the law perfectly. He used it to kill the Jews who was weak in the scriptures. This was the perfect person to deal with the Hellenist Jews and the Israelites calling themselves everything including Gentiles. This is what they really were. They was Israelites. What we do today, calling ourselves now. Today, we call our own selves what? Negroes, blacks, coloreds, African American, 2 continents. We call ourselves everything but what you truly are. The Most High also did something. He programmed us a special way. And we're going to find that out right here in the scriptures. How did he program us Israelites a special way? We are peculiar people, the Israelite Jews. So what did he do? He even said it. So he hid his laws in our inward parts. And his people to wake up the dry bones, and when they hear his voice. So what is this saying? So when you hear his voice, that true teaching, those dry bones that you hear in Ezekiel, this is these dry bones he's talking about. So this is what he's talking about. And we're going to read a little bit of that. Where you will see over there, you go to Ezekiel 37 and 4. And he said unto me, prophesy unto these bones, and say unto them, ye O dry bones, hear. You understand that? Hear the word of the Lord. See, this is what he's talking about. He had to put his laws on the inward parts. So when he came to seek it, guess what? And he speak to you, you're going to hear it. You're going to understand what he's saying. This is all he's saying here. Now, how do we know this? Jeremiah 31:33. These are not in here, but I'm telling you where they are to where you can reference and go get them. And what it says, but this shall be the covenant that I make with the house of Israel. After those days, the Lord will put his law in the inward parts and write them on their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people. Why? Because he hid his laws on the inward parts. This is why when he come in and he speak and you hear this true word of God, you get it. And the ones who don't get it, they start learning because they're going to have an appetite for it, because now you're feeding something that was hidden in you. This is what he's talking about. Now, we're going to look at another part where Paul explains this to the Corinthians about hearing the gospel for the first time. He's saying the same thing that we just read in the Old Testament. Watch. Let's go to 2 Corinthians 4:3. He said, but if our gospel be hid, where did he hid it? It's the laws of the commandments. It is hid to them that are lost. This gospel of ours is hid in us, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This is why we have to understand this, but it gets even deeper than that. Let's go to Matthew 13:44. Matthew 13:44. He said again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a treasure hid in the field, in which when a man hath found, he hath hid it, and for joy there goeth in and selleth all that he hath and buy that field. What did he do? He gave himself for us. The kingdom of heaven is coming down here. You can read that right in Revelation. We are not going up there. His treasure is hid in us. His laws, statutes, and commandments. And when you hear them, you automatically react as if you heard something all your life. It's a connection that you cannot even describe, but you know it. This is the difference that you find out if you tied to God or you not. You have many people going to hear the truth and understand the precepts and go through it, and some going to get it and some are not. This is where all the money is on. Let's go to Matthew 18 and 11, because we're going to get into Paul in 1 second. It says, for the Son of Man is come to save that which was lost. What is lost? The house of the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This is what he calls us, as for Paul, not to teach against the laws, but to direct them back to the Most High. He's just like that little sheepdog that you'll see that'll direct them sheep. That was Paul, to direct you back, and the sheep herd you back to the chief shepherd. But the Most High called Paul to action, and we're going to see where he called Paul directly to action. Let's go over here and look at Acts 9. And at that time, Paul was under Saul. Or you can understand in Hebrew, it's Shaul, but Saul in the English, this is what his name was. So we're going to look at it that way. So it says, in Saul, yet breathing out, threatening and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord. So it's letting you know this is what Paul was about. And went unto the high priest and desired of them letters to Damascus to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined around about him a light from heaven. Now Jesus is getting ready to explain to Paul to go into the city, and what you're going to see, he's going to tell him to go somewhere. He's not asking. It's a big difference between asking and telling somebody, because he told him something to do. He didn't ask him something to do. Let's keep moving down. We're going to watch what's going to happen. It says, and he fell to the earth and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, who art thou, Lord? So he's not sure, but he's thinking it's the Lord. He said, and the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And he trembled and in astonished said, Lord, what will thou have me to do? And the Lord said unto him, arise and go into the city, and it shall be told to thee what thou must do. Not must do, not what thou can do, what thou must do. He's commanded to go do this. Watch this. Go down some more. We're going to go to verse 9. And when they was there 3 days without sight, and neither did eat nor drink. Because remember, that light blinded him. Verse 10. And there was a certain disciple at Damascus named Ananias, and to him said the Lord in a vision, Ananias. And he said, behold, I am here, Lord. Now, you could look in the Old Testament where you see the old prophets. This is how they answered, but you can see Paul was out of sync with that. See, because he said, I am here. That's how you always was the answer to the Lord. And then it said, and the Lord said unto him, arise and go into the streets, which is called Straight, and inquire in the house of Judas for the one called Saul of Tarshish. And behold, he prayeth. Now, we know it's going to be a problem here. But one thing we're going to look at here, Ananias already know about the fame that Paul has. And we're going to see some of that. And then it says, I have seen in a vision a man named Ananias. That's it's going back to Paul, coming and putting his hand on him that he might receive his sight. So he's letting you know he already done set Paul up for this. So I just need you to go there and fulfill it. So now watch this, verse 13. And Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard by many of this man. He done heard about this dude. I'm talking about Paul is well known. His fame goes out. And he goes on, how much evil he have done to thy saints at Jerusalem. He clearly know of the fame of Paul. Paul was all about twisting you up with the scriptures and killing you. This is what Paul was about. Let's go a little bit deeper. Verse 15, it says, but the Lord said unto him, he said unto Ananias, go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me. You see that? Paul is a chosen vessel unto me. To do what? To bear my name before the Gentiles. These Hellenist people that's acting as Gentiles. This is all he's saying. Not to a people of Gentiles that's not in the fold. Because what we got to remember, what did Jesus say? I'm only come to the house of the lost sheep of Israel. These people who acting as Gentiles, people who acting like they don't know who the Lord is. They don't know who God is, nothing. This is why he's saying that will go before these Gentiles and kings and the children of what? Of Israel. He makes it clear right there. So go before the Gentile. Who are these Gentiles? Of Israel. Not Gentiles of Japhet, not the Gentiles of Ham. The Gentiles of Israel. He's making itself clear. Paul was a chosen vessel to teach the Hellenist Jews of Israel. We will see in the previous scriptures the history of Paul knowing the perfect manner of the law. We just seen this. And Jesus chose him to bear his name before the Gentile. But what? People acting like Jews, converting, but most people think they're converting people, Gentiles, to be Jews. And that's not what was going on. He was actually converting the Jews to come back to their true belief. But most people truly think that this is talking about Gentiles and talking about these Greeks and everything else. But we're going to clear some of this. So we're going to go into the Apocrypha and we're going to look at First Maccabees and see why he sent Paul to these weak people coming up. Because we're going to look at King Antiochus, who is King Epiphanes. That was his other name. He wrote the Home Kingdom. And he told them that they're going to be one people, and not to call themselves no more Jews or Israelites. Let's see that, because we're going to get an understanding on this one. It says, moreover, the king Antiochus wrote to the whole kingdom, and now this was a Greek king. And if most people have these regular 66 book Bibles and do not put their apocrypha in there, they the one had a problem. Because when you go to Daniel and you look in Daniel, you're gonna find the Babylonian captivity, you're gonna find the Medo-Persian captivity, and you're gonna find the Roman captivity. But in Daniel, it also tells you about the Greek captivity. When you go in your 66 books, the Greek captivity you cannot find. Why? Because they took it out. See, that's part of the problem. They took that book out of there. But let's move on. So he said, so King Antiochus King Epiphanes wrote to the whole kingdom that all should be one people. Many of the Israelites consented to this law, to this new law that he put out. This was the Greek king. And what if they still held? What if they still held to the laws? If they still held to their still laws, what would happen to them? They would end up start enforcing the laws even more. So what we're going to find out is what actually happening. Let's move down a little bit more. And then everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathens agreed according to the commandments of the king. So all the heathens agreed. So now we have Israelites who had to leave because they consented to it. And we're going to see that right now. We're going to go to verse 43. And you're going to see it says, yea, many also of Israelites consented to his religion. So it's telling you right there. So they walked away and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. So many of the Israelites, they did the same thing. They walked away from the Lord. Why? Because he said we're going to be one people. Why? Because if you didn't consent to the commandments if you consented to the commandments of the Most High, you hold on to that. When they come to your house, they'll get your books, they'll tear them up, they'll burn them, and then they start enforcing the laws even more. We're going to see that. So we know that they had to become one people. But let's go more. Let's jump down to 56. 56, and it says, and when they had rent into pieces that the books of the law which they found, they burned them with fire. So when they found those books, they burned them books in a furnace. They got rid of them. But watch this, verse 57. And whosoever was found with any of the books of the testament or any consented of the law, the king's commandments was that they should be put to death. So he's making it clear. He meaning business. So if you was found with the book of the laws of the Most High, you was going to be put to death. No questions asked. Remember, so this is why when you remember Timothy in the Second Testament or in the New Testament, this is why Timothy and his family, this is why Timothy wasn't circumcised. And we're going to find out some more reasons on that in a little while. But first we're going to get some of this part on the Greek captivity. And then we're going to come back and find out why his parents didn't do this. Because Timothy wasn't circumcised. They were just coming out the Greek captivity. They was not allowed back then to circumcise their boys because certain things would happen. But first we're going to see what happened and what Paul did to Timothy in the Second Testament first. Then we'll see why he wasn't circumcised. So that's what we're going to do first. So let's go to Acts 16 and 1. We're going to see what happened first. It says, then when he came to Derbe in Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple which was named Timotheus, which is Timothy, the son of a certain woman which is a Jewess. Now that, knowing this, I have a teaching on this, and when you see this Jewess, I'll give a video on this and explain exactly what this is. And believe, but his father was a Greek. Now, this is the biggest problem that they go through. Now, his father was a Greek, but what kind of Greek? Was he one of the brothers, like he once said? Because I even had a brother told me once said, what white man in that time would marry a Jew, a black woman? back in that time period. It was worse back then than it is now. So all we got to do is go back to the 1800s to 1700. What white man will openly marry a black woman back then? That wouldn't make any sense, because you literally committing your own suicide. This is what this is talking about. So this Greek is talking about something else. So his father was a Greek, but you'll see his father was a Hellenist. This is what this is talking about. So if he was a Hellenist during that time period, it was worse then. But now we're going to see back then, by reason Timothy wasn't circumcised, because his mother as well as Timothy would have been killed. And this is what his father was a Greek. That's why it's stating that his father was a Greek. He lived as a Hellenist Greek. With now first verse 2, and was well reported by the brethren that were at Lystra and Iconium. Why? He has a well reported. Okay, now if his father was a Greek and God only dealt with Israel, how would he get a well report of the Jews? See, these things don't make sense. We got to make sense of these things. In this, so how you gonna get one from them? That wouldn't make no sense. But for Paul to do what he had to do, Paul would have got hung up going into these places, dealing with these Hellenist people, and then you had some of these Jews who know who he is, and they would have hung Paul because why? Because Timothy wasn't circumcised. And this is why you see verse 3, and it says, "Him would Paul have to go forth with him." So him would Paul have to go forth with him. So he went with Paul. So then, and took and circumcised him because of the Jews which were in those quarters. So them Jews that was in those areas, they knew clearly that Timothy wasn't circumcised. And if he would have been coming in there and he's not keeping that covenant that Abraham made with God by circumcision, they knew they were going to hang Paul upside down on this one. But why? Paul knew the perfect order of the law. For they knew that his father was a Greek. That's all it's saying. They knew his father was a Hellenist. They knew his father didn't hold to those commandments. But now let's see what would have happened to Timothy if they would have circumcised him, as they were still probably in that Greek period. They just coming out. Let's go back to Maccabees, first chapter 48. It says, "And they that should leave their own children uncircumcised," this is what happened to Timothy, "and to make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and provocation." Why? Let's look at it a little bit more, because the Greek king, one, ordered they could not be circumcised, and if you did, and the worst part is he had these other little Hellenist ones, these Israelites. They'll come and they'll check you every month like clockwork, and if they found out that you was not they found out that you were circumcised, then what's gonna happen to the mother? They end up hanging the children from the necks of the mother by string, which we're gonna read directly in Scripture, but we'll let the Scriptures do the talking. Then we'll talk about it. Let's jump down to verse 60. And it says, "At which time, according to the commandments, they be put to death certain women." See that? Certain women that have caused their children to be circumcised. Just as we were sitting there saying. So if Timothy would have been circumcised back then by keeping the commandments of God, her mama and him would have been killed. Why? Verse 61. "And they hanged the infants about their necks, and raffled their houses, and slew them that had circumcised them." So everybody in the house would have got killed. If they was caught and their children were circumcised, then they had a rope tied around the infant neck, hang from the necks of their mothers, and walk through the streets before killing the mother also. This is why Timothy's mother and father would not circumcise Timothy. At the same time, during the Greek ruling period, it would be a big change after everything was going through. Paul knew the Jews wasn't going to have this man to come to them better, acting, as a Hellenist Jew, acting like a Greek. They wasn't going to have it. He's going to come to him correct. If you're going to come to them Jews, you're going to come to them correct. This would have been committing suicide for both of them, for Paul and Timothy. So all to come here was the main verse we're going to look up on Paul. And what we're going to see is that Paul, in Ephesians, did Paul abolish the law based on, we know he learned under Gamaliel, who was a doctor of the law, and was Jesus to teach the Gentiles, the Hellenists, or was he to teach the other ones? But was this laws done away with? Let's look at this. We're going to go to Ephesians 2 and 15. This is one of the most controversial scriptures we're going to be seeing. It says, having abolished in the flesh the enmity, even the law of the commandments contained in the ordinances, for to make in himself of one twain one new man, so making peace. What is he saying here? We got to understand of many things. We're going to completely break this down. So the laws of the Most High is saying that these are sin offering, having abolished the flesh in the enmity. We're going to explain each one of these words in detail. In the law of the commandments contained in the ordinances. The commandments contained in the ordinances is what we need to really understand. Having abolished the ordinances, meaning the works of the law inside the commandments itself. You see what I'm talking about? So, but we're going to explain this even deeper to where we're going to make sure you have a solid understanding as we go out of here. It says, so when we sin, we have bring sin offering to the Most High. That's the ordinance. We had to bring a sin offering to him. We're going to see this here because we're going to go into it. We know how we work here. We don't explain nothing and don't show you scripture showing you exactly that, not something around about that. We have to show exactly that what we're saying. So you have to bring a sin offering to the Lord when you sin. And this is what this verse 15 is talking about, and you're going to see it after we break this all down. Let's go to Leviticus 4 and 1, and we're going to get an understanding on this. It says, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if a soul shall sin through ignorance against any of the commandments of the Lord, against any of the commandments, anything that proceeded out of the mouth of the Lord is a commandment, concerning the thing which ought not be to be done, he shall do against any of them, if the priest that is anointed do sin according to the sin of the people, then then let him bring for his sin. He got to bring something for his sin, which he hath sinned, a young bullock without blemish unto the Lord, for what? For a sin offering. This is what was going on. You had to bring what? Your best animal without blemish. It had to be perfect unto the Lord for what? As payment for the sin committed against the Most High. And the sin offering must be killed. Why? This was teaching us something had to die in the offense against the Most High. In this case, it was a bullock. Let's look at another one. 4:28. It says, if his sin which hath sinned come to his knowledge, then shall he bring us an offering, a kid of goats, a female without blemish. It got to be perfect. And for his sin which he hath sinned. So we got to bring a sin offering. In this case, it's a goat. This is the ordinance, what you have to do. You have to bring something. Verse 29. And he shall lay his hand upon his head of the sin offering, and slay the sin offering in the place of the burnt offering. So you got to lay your hand upon what? The sin offering. That's the ordinance. You have to bring that as the sin offering, and slay and kill it as a sin offering. The Most High is teaching us what we should be knowing, that something have to die when you commit sin. Because what? Sin is commendable to death. But what? But he showed us grace using these animals as a replacement. This is what they was doing. Those animals was a replacement for death, as with Christ, which we're going to start seeing. Now, I know some of you guys are probably going to start clicking right there, but unto grace is the replacement, as with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, 3:21, which is not in here, but 3:21, and I will read it. Unto Adam also and to his wife the Lord God made coats of skin and clothed them. Two animals, what? Had to die to cover Adam and Eve. Sin to be covered. Something innocent had to die. Because what? God can't look upon sin. So the animals was what? Was sinless. But what happened? The Most High God killed two sheep to cover their sin. This is the ordinance he abolished. Let's go back and look at Ephesians 2:15. It gets a little bit more understanding there. Having abolished in the flesh the enmity which even the law of the commandments contain in ordinances. So abolish. Right there, we're gonna break this down now. Having abolished. Abolish is to put it into. So it had to put it into something, a system, a practice, or an institution. So to abolish, you're putting it into something. That's what that is. They said having abolished, putting it in. That's all it's saying. Now, enmity, what most people really don't understand, enmity is deep-rooted hatred. That's what that is. In the flesh, there's deep-rooted hatred that he's talking about. The commandments contained in the ordinances which make in himself of twain one new man, so making peace. Jesus in this case used his own flesh as a sacrifice, including the law of the commandment contained in the ordinances, which is what we have to do according to the instructions given in the law, what we must do when we commit sin. What? Bringing an animal which the Most High instruct us to bring as a sin offering. This is what Jesus came to stop and what? To replace. And when we read in a minute, Paul completely breaks this down from Daniel. This is a complete breakdown of Daniel right here. And to show you what I'm talking about, we're going to see this exact same verse, and this is why Paul taught the Old Testament. But all this right here, this one verse right here, Paul breaks down Daniel 9. And watch. We're going to go to Daniel 9:25 and watch how he broke this down. Daniel 9:25. It says, "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandments to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks, and the street shall be built again, and the wall even the troublous times." This is teaching us, this is a complete teaching within its own. And many are teaching this day that is a false doctrine being sold around the world based on that verse right there. Verse 26. "And after 62 weeks, which they teach on that too, which is another lie, that the Messiah shall be cut off." He's going to be killed, but not for himself. "And the people of the prince that shall come and shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with the flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined." So right here, so he shall be killed, and again, speaking in thousands of years, that these teachers and preachers teaching is not correct. They literally, I do a teaching on this, which we looking to do a teaching later in this, but it's not talking these thousands of years what they will teach you. This is not what this is teaching. And I'll go into that, but this one is going to go, and we're going to explain a few other things. Let's go to verse 27. And it says, "And he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week." See, now this right here, that kills that Jesus died on Friday. Because in the midst of the week, it's talking about on Wednesday. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblations to cease. He's making this clear. In the overspreading of the abomination, he shall make it desolate even until the consummation, and that the determined shall be poured upon the desolate. What is this saying? Verse 27, here is killed Jesus. He didn't die on Friday, but here is speaking in the middle of the week. But to prove this, we're going to use some blue letter Bible, which a Bible they love to use. But we're going to go get their definition besides showing you the other definition to show you exactly what this is talking about. Because he should call the sacrifice and oblations to cease. So what is oblations showing in the blue letter Bible? It's an offering. To stop and to cease. You see right there, it says the cause, the sacrifice and oblations to cease, to stop. Consummation is a point where something is completed or finalized. At the end of the completion is to present something that's the end of the world. Desolate is deprived of comfort, because his resurrection seal and consummates his redemptive power in the redemption of our person, involved in the redemption of our body, now being used as what? As living sacrifices. Now we should completely understand this verse and what Paul was saying. But first we're going to show you the shadow of good things to come. So first we're going to show what oblations. Let's go right here, right now, and we're going to see. This is one of their favorite places. And right here where oblations is, it's telling you clear as day. It's an offering. That's all it's saying. A gift, a tribute, offering, same thing. And right here, look at verse C. Offering to who? To God. This is showing you in their own books that they'll sit there and they'll still lie to you the other way around. But they're going to show you something different, but this is all oblation mean. This is the meaning of oblation. Just all it means is an offering. Let's go a little bit deeper. And this is to cease. Here you go, cease. But what is it going to do? To cease. To stop. And we're gonna see all the rest of this. To cease, to rest. You can go all down here. To rest, to labor, to cease, and then here go your main one. To cause to cease, put an end to. You're gonna put an end to something. That's why he said he's gonna cause oblations to cease. These offerings to cease. This is what he's talking about. This is what Daniel's talking about, and this is what Paul broke down. But let's keep going a little bit deeper. The consummation. Same thing. Consummation at a point where something is complete or finalized. The end of a completion is presented in the system of things and put it into the world. Same thing. Consummation. Same thing. Completion. Termination. Full end. Complete destruction. It's telling you all this is the consummation is complete. This is all it's been saying. This is why we have to break these words down. Now the blue letter Bible here, which I still don't recommend, but I'm just showing you how they're using these words, and it's telling you the same thing. Now we're going to look at desolate. Desolate. Astonished. Destroyed. Wondered. Astonishment. Why is it saying it that way? Because this is the same thing who deprived of comfort. Who is us? Because his resurrection seals and consummates his redemptive power in the redemption of our person, involved in the redemption of our bodies that are now being used as what? As living sacrifices. Now we should completely understand the verse of what Paul is saying. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whether the Lord shall lead thee. That is Deuteronomy 28 verbatim. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. Psalms 79:7. They shall be devoured. They have devoured Jacob and lay waste his dwelling place. Ain't this what this talking about? Same thing. 2 Chronicles 7:19. We're gonna pick up 2 Chronicles 7:19, and let's look at some of this. But if we turn away and forsake, if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, he's making this clear, which I have set before you, and ye shall go and serve other gods and worship them. Many have turned away from the Most High statutes and commandments because what? They believe the laws are done away with. Now serving other gods, false Christ. They believe, oh Christ, we can eat this, we can eat that, we can do this, we can do that. They believe they can do everything. All we got to do is just say we're sorry. Well, we're going to find out some of that too. But that's a false Christ they're teaching you. All you have to do is forgive me, Lord, and you walk away. They're teaching you a false Christ. Jesus said, for many shall arise and haven't changed nothing. But so many gonna rise and he haven't changed nothing. But Peter told you about Paul's letters. Some of his letters are hard to be understood, so them that are unlearned in the scriptures would lead you to destruction. They're going to lead you directly to death. This is all it's talking about. Let's go down to verse 20. Will I pluck them up by the roots out of my land, which I have given them in this house, talking about Israel, in this house which I have sanctified, who is separated to itself, for my name I will cast out of my sight and will make it be a proverb and a byword among all nations. Didn't we just talk about that in Deuteronomy? You will become a proverb and a byword, saying the same thing. And we over here in Chronicles. But we got to understand, Israel was separated, sanctified unto itself, are cast from his face. Why? Because the Most High cannot look upon sin. We are a proverb. In short, pity, saying in general use of stating general truth. Among the world, how's that? Among the world, all nations. I don't care where you go in the world, Israel is always in the most impoverished locations for hardship. Always. You can't go nowhere in the world and go in an impoverished area and you're not going to see the nation of Israel there. I don't care where you go. Always there. But people say, what about the ones who are doing good? What about the ones who are doing good? Remember them Israelites that sold out? It's the same ones here. It's no difference. The ones who, they done became billionaires, same ones sold out back there, same ones here. No different. So I don't care where you go, you're going to see that. The byword is a person or a site in a notorious, outstanding example or an embodiment of something. And that's showing us. Verse 21. In this house, Israel, which is high, shall be an astonishment. Exactly what we've been saying. To everyone that passes by it. So everyone that passes by Israel, we're going to be an astonishment. Because no matter where they go, we all going to be on the same boat. And I know people have heard that old saying many times. We all on the same boat. I don't care where you go in the world, we all on the same boat. So that he shall say, why have the Lord done thus unto this land? Talking about the people. Watch this. And unto this house. He's making it clear. The house of Israel shall be an amazement, a disbelief. And that's all that means. A disbelief and a wonder. When you read the scriptures, you see this has completely come to pass. Because we are an amazement. We are a byword and a proverb. And the problem is, the nation of Israel still don't believe this is happening. Many will say that they have done well for themselves and became wealthy, but just like it was back then, same as I said, same now. But watch this. I don't have this in there, but we won't tell you, just thought about it. Let's look at real quick 1 Maccabees 1:11. 1 Maccabees 1:11. It says, in those days went there out of Israel wicked men. Tells you right there in 1 Maccabees 1:11. In those days went out wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we had much sorrow. Is this telling you something different? This telling you the same thing what they did with Moses. When Moses disappeared, what they wanted to do? They went right back to their hellish ways. Same thing here right now. No difference. The same thing with Moses, the same thing. We want to go right back to Egypt. Egypt don't mean nothing but bondage. We're going right back now, and we do this the same thing to this day. Verse 22. And it shall be answered, because they have forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, out of bondage, and laid hold to other gods. And then he tells us clearly not to do this. And worship them and serve them. Therefore have he brought all this evil upon them. I'm talking, it's clear as day. And the main reason why we as a nation have left the Most High God commandments, which have brought us out of bondage and worshiping false God, we went right back to serve them. As it said, a dog will return to his vomit. And we have caused this evil to come upon ourselves, because this evil that we think is judgment. For what? For disobedience. This is what Paul is teaching you. Paul teaches that we are to come back, and Christ made a way for us. This is all Paul came to do. He didn't come here to tell you to go against the laws. He came here to tell you to go with the laws. That's why he constantly gave you those flip sides. And then we had those same people want to tell these same lies about these commandments of God. But just as I said, when you sacrificing yourself and you continually to break God's laws and thinking you can say you're sorry, just as I said, Jesus telling you, as Paul going to tell you clearly, there ain't no more sacrifice for that. Jesus didn't come for him to keep dying every time you keep committing the same sin, and he keep climbing right back up on that stake and killing himself for something you keep repeatedly doing. This is the same thing he was talking about in the Old Testament. They have no conscience of this. But we're going to read some of that. Let's go to Hebrews 10. Let's go to Hebrews 10. We're going to pick it up at 6. For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never with those sacrifices. See, and this is what he's getting ready to get into. Which that they offer year by year continually, to make the comers thereunto perfect. But what was happening? When they offered offering, they did not make, sin, it don't make you sinless. When they was bringing those offerings, it didn't make you sinless at all. But watch this, verse 2. See, because they say on top, it's saying, you're going to continue, they're going to bring them year by year, but those newcomers unto perfect. And it says, for then would they not have ceased to be offered, because they, the worshipers, once purged, should have no more conscience of sin. But what? They had conscience of it because they keep doing the same sin. They would have stopped the offerings a long time ago, but would have learned and purged themselves from sin, and would have no more conscience of that sinning because of the sacrifice they had offered. They would have purged and got rid of something that's unwanted, unfit, a bad feeling or memory. But guess what? They remembered this because they had to offer the same thing year after year. Let's go a little bit deeper. Go down to verse 3. But in those sacrifices, there is a remembrance again made for sin every year. Just as I'm saying. You still remember, okay, well, I done did this last year. Well, yeah, I did this again, so let me bring. This is all it's talking about. And they continue to commit the same sin every time, year after year, offering the sin offering, the same thing year after year. Verse 4. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and of goats should take away sin. He's making it clear. So the killing of animals was not going to take away the sin, as he stated in the verse 1. And you can also go all the way back to Genesis. That wasn't going to take away sin. That covered the sin. That was our schoolmaster. This is our schoolmaster, as we always keep saying, to teach us how to commit an offense towards God. When we transgress against his law, statute, and commandments, which is sin, we should be killed for our transgression, which is sin. But he has made a way for us to do that. Verse 5. Wherefore, when he cometh into the world, he says, sacrifice an offering. So bring an offering, thou wouldest not. What are you talking about? But a body thou hast prepared for me. He's talking about getting your body, make your body clean. Make your body perfect. Don't worry about this sheep. Worry about your body. Bring your body to me. Don't bring me some animal. Bring me your body, and you offer that to me as sinless, perfect, upright, to where it be acceptable to me. This is what he's saying. But everybody want that, well, I can keep on sinning because Jesus is going to do it. This is not what he's saying. He don't have no pleasure in that. So Jesus came for the ultimate sacrifice, his own body. Let's go a little bit deeper. Verse 6. And in burnt offering and sacrifices for sin, thou hast no pleasure. So the Most High had no pleasure in the burnt offering. The sin that you commit again and again, and not learning that something had to die. Verse 7. Then said Jesus, I come in a volume of a book, it is written of me. It is written of me to do thy will, O God. What is he saying there? Jesus said, see, because it said I come in the volume, it's talking about a roll. Because that's what they had. They had a roll. He said, I come in the roll of a book. It is prophesied of me to do the will of the Most High God. That's what he's actually telling you. He came to do the will of God. I'm going to have a perfect body that's perfect and acceptable in his sight to be an offering. Is what we're supposed to be doing. We're going to get deep into that part. Verse 8. And above, when he has said, sacrifice an offering, a burnt offering, and offering for sin, thou wouldest not, neither has pleasure therein, which are offered by the law. Animals was offered by the law. That was the ordinance that you had to pay for, was by law. You had to bring an animal that without blemish. You had to bring your best. That's what he's talking about, because you had to offer it what? By the law. Everything proceed out of his mouth was law. He proceed, when you sin, you bring me this. That's that ordinance. This is what it's talking about. Verse 9. Then he said, Lo, I come to do thy will, O God. Here's your key. He taketh away the first, bringing the sheep, bringing the bullocks, that he may establish the second, your body. This is all it's saying. So Jesus came to take away the offering of animals, to establish the second offering of our own bodies. If you look at, and I don't actually have it in here, but I'm just thinking about it, is Romans 12:1. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies as living sacrifices, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Which is your reasonable service. Your reasonable service. Not Jesus' reasonable service. Your reasonable service. Romans 12:1. Verse 10. By the which we are sanctified, separated, though the offering of our body of Jesus Christ once and for all. Jesus is our example that we are to follow, not doing as they did back then, but offering Jesus' body every time we do something wrong, day by day, month by year by year. He didn't die for that, as I said. Plus, sin, and when you willfully sinning, is not forgiven. Understand what I'm saying? We can look at Hebrews 10 and 26. We just need to put that there, because willfully sinning is not forgiven. Hebrews 10:26, you're not going to see it on the screen, but you're going to read it. It says, for if we sin willfully, that we have, after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sin. So all is clearly telling you, so if you willfully sin, after you receive the knowledge of the truth, he ain't died for that. You have to live with that. So Jesus was our example that we should follow. So when we sin, we offer up Jesus' body as a sacrifice when we do it out of ignorance. And then there we stop and we have sinned, making ourselves righteous before the Most High. But not committing that same sin anymore. So we need to follow the lead, as it even says in 1 Peter. 1 Peter 2:21, even until we were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that we should follow his steps. So we need to present our bodies as living sacrifices, which is the ordinance Paul was speaking of. This is all he was talking about. Because what we just read, that what you see right there in verse 9, he taketh away the first, which was by the law. We had to bring those animals, but he took away that, and he established the second. He established that to where we present our bodies as living sacrifices. Now let's see, did Paul break any laws? Because now they saying Paul teach to break the law. Let's see, did Paul break any laws? We're going to see this, and let's see if Paul go say this for himself. Let's go to Acts 25. Now when Festus was come into the province, after 3 days, he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul. So now they forming him against Paul. They planned against Paul and besought him and desired favor against him, that they would send forth him to Jerusalem, lying to wait in the way to kill him. Because they trying to knock Paul up. They're trying to set him up. See, this is the whole catch. Because if they can kill him, see, most of the stuff of the Romans, a lot of their laws was broken, was not to death, but laws that was broken of the Jews was mainly to death. That's what we have to remember. And most people tell you, oh, the Romans did this, Romans did that. Romans mainly put you in jail, and they'll put you in there. Sometimes you might be in there for 4 or 5 years for doing something really small. You might be in there for life for doing something just a little bit more. The Jews was unto death. Let's go a little bit deeper. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself would depart shortly thither. Let them therefore, said he, which is among you are able, go down with me and accuse this man, if there be any wickedness in him. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day, sitting in the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. Now here go the setup. Here we come into the setup right now. And when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood around and about, and laid many grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. Why not? Because Paul didn't break any laws. But they came down to lie on Paul. This is what they were doing, but they couldn't prove him. Verse 8. And while he answered for himself, And this watch how you gonna start getting into it. Why he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, which is talking about the commandments of God, neither against the temple, which is getting into Rome, nor against Caesar have I offended anything at all. So he's broken no commandments, but watch this. He's going to get real interesting. Jump down to verse 9. But Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, because that's all he's focusing on, because these Jews were really pressing him. So he was willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said, will thou go up to Jerusalem and there be judged of these things? Because they know they can get him down there. That's why they were trying to set him up, because down there they can get him. But Paul already knew what they was up to, and Paul wasn't falling for it. So let's jump down. Then said Paul, I stand in Caesar's judgment seat where I ought to be judged. Because he knew he didn't do nothing wrong. So the Jews, I have done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. But watch this. This is the main part that you need to understand. Verse 11. For if I be an offender, if he has sinned of something, or committed anything worthy of death, talking about the commandments of God, anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. Because what? He was willing to do the Jews' pleasure, so he's trying to set him up. So if he go down there, they were going to get him. But he's telling you clear that if he did anything worthy of death, Paul saying himself, I'm going to kill myself. He refuses not to die. But if there be none of these things, whether they accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. He talking unto them Jews who's trying to kill me. I appeal unto Caesar, because he know he haven't did nothing wrong, and clearly knows he didn't commit nothing worthy of death, the commandments of God, and unto the Jews just wanted to kill him. Why? Because this is what he used Paul for. Because Paul can flip them up. So my brothers and sisters, we have seen many that came to sit there and say Paul taught against the truth. And Paul telling you clearly right here, if he be an offender or have committed anything worthy of death, anything worthy of death is not talking about the Romans laws. This is talking about the commandments of God, because Festus wanted to do this for the Jews. Paul said clearly, I refuse not to die. So how can we sit there and say that Paul taught against the law? Last verse, Galatians 4:16. I am therefore become your enemy. So many not going to like these teachings about Paul, because Paul didn't teach against the law. And what happens? Because I tell you the truth. So many people are going to learn about what the truth is today, and they still think that they can do all these different things and be able to understand God in different ways. They believe that Paul taught completely against the law. He taught that the law was done away with. But once you understand what he's saying, Jesus came to take away the first, the offering of these. That was the ordinance that he had. The ordinance is when God says something and he tells you how to do it. That's the ordinance. That's he giving you directions on how to do it. Paul came and then Jesus came and took that away. And then he established the second, and that was him. He became the ultimate sacrifice. And what Paul even made it explain, and what Jesus even explained, to where even as you present your bodies as living sacrifice is a reasonable service that we should be doing. As long as we can sit there and we can do this reasonable service to him, to where when we ignorantly sin and we go to him, and we should be able to be presenting ourselves as living sacrifices to God. But many of us will continually look at this, completely go through this precepts and get the understanding. Because one thing we do know, Jesus came to get a people. He spread us out, and we went and we worshipped everything else. Why? Because we were stiff-necked people. We hard-headed. but once he gathered it out, he did one thing, and he did one thing to us. He put his laws and the statutes on our hearts. So when he called, we would get it and we'll understand it. Many people will want to cling on to that. Once we cling on to it, we will understand what he's going, and we're going to constantly want to feed that. And as we continually want to feed that, we will continually go directly towards God. But we have some who going to like the lust of the world and going to sit there and they're going to put this away and they're going to follow their own ways to their own destruction. So many going to do that. That's why I say only 2/3 going to be saved, because many going to choose that lifestyle that's out there besides coming back to the laws of God. So with that, I wish you had a great teaching from this one and a good understanding. So with that, if you have any questions, please email me. I'm Elder Michael Johnson. I thank each and every person, and shalom.